I do believe the biggest game this weekend, when you factor in college football and the NFL, it is the game that occurs on Sunday night between the Miami Dolphins visiting the Philadelphia Eagles. And the only other game that could maybe match this one heading into the season, where it feels like it's a Super Bowl preview, is when you do have the Miami Dolphins going up against the Kansas City Chiefs later in the year. And that game was just a greedy move by the NFL, and really a piggish move by the NFL to schedule it in Germany. That game is considered to be a Chiefs home game. That should have been the triumphant return of Tyreek Hill to Arrowhead going up against Kansas City. But the NFL said, let's play that game at, I believe, 9:30 in the morning and have it being played in Germany. But when we get set for this matchup between Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts on Sunday Night Football on NBC, between the Eagles and the Dolphins, my first thought is actually the MVP race this year in the NFL. And full disclosure, I've been thinking about this. There's not an MVP name now that nationally everyone's gravitating towards, and everyone's saying it's clear cut. This guy is the favorite right now to win the MVP. Sure, the betting odds right now say it's Tua Tagovailoa at plus 350 on the sportsbook that I'm looking at right now. But I don't even believe that Tua Tagovailoa is the first MVP on his team. And that's not bashing Tua. I think the world of Tua. I think Tua is a heck of a quarterback, and he's proving that this year through the first 6 games of the season, and the Dolphins being off to this ridiculous start at 5-1. But if I was an MVP voter, I would be voting for Tyreek Hill through the first 6 weeks of the season, because Tyreek Hill is on a ridiculous pace right now to have 2,300 yards receiving and also 17 receiving touchdowns. And I know Tyreek did speak a big game going into this year. He was like, oh, I'm going to have 2,000 yards. I'm like, 2,000 yards? You know, you have Jalen Waddle also on the team standing right next to you. There's only so many mouths to feed and only one football with the Miami Dolphins. But right now, through the first 6 weeks of the season, it's not even close. The most electrifying player in football has been Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill right now, outside of quarterbacks, is the most intimidating non-quarterback in the NFL through the first 6 weeks of the season. And teams just don't know how to prepare for him. Opposing defenders shaking their boots when they have to go up against him. And he's on pace to have this just absolutely crazy season. Once again, when you look at over 2,300 yards receiving and 17 receiving touchdowns. And really, Tyreek Hill has changed this organization, and also Mike McDaniel has changed this organization as well. Because we all thought Brian Flores was this really good coach and was this really special coach. And I would like to see Brian Flores get another opportunity to be a head coach in this league. But when he was in Miami, he was looking at every other way to get out of the relationship and the partnership with Tua Tagovailoa. And even though it felt cheesy and disingenuous at times, the moment Mike McDaniel and Tyreek Hill got to Miami, they gravitated towards Tua Tagovailoa. They said, Tua, you are our guy. You are our quarterback. Where Mike McDaniel, right, Tua's even talked about this, went to Tua Tagovailoa's charity event, and he said just that support meant so much to Tua Tagovailoa early on in his his career and his relationship with Mike McDaniel. And Tyreek Hill, the moment he got traded to Miami in that blockbuster trade, he was saying that Tua Tagovailoa is the most accurate passer in the game, and he's the most accurate quarterback that he's ever played with. And everyone's like, whoa, wait a second. You just played a bunch of years with the great Patrick Mahomes. How can you even put Tua Tagovailoa and Patrick Mahomes in the same sentence and also say Tua does this better than Patrick Mahomes? So really, McDaniel and Tyreek Hill have changed this entire organization. And now this is a Dolphins team where I was just doing a local hit on 560 WQAM with Mark Hochman, and he asked me, do you think the Dolphins are elite? And I said, I'm not ready to call them elite, but if this makes sense, they could win a Super Bowl this year with the way that they're built and what they're getting back with Jalen Phillips and Jalen Ramsey and Devon Achane as well when he gets off the PUP list or he gets off the injured list and he makes his return after having to sit out for 4 games because of the injury. So this team right now, They're at 5-1. They're a team that's dominant. They're a team that on the offensive side of the ball is off to a historical start to the season. And I know things aren't handed out or things aren't guaranteed through the first 6 games, but this is a team right now that it's really special. And the reason why I'm not willing to call them elite yet, even though I think the sky's the limit this year for the Miami Dolphins, is because I got to see it more out of them. And I got to see Tua stay healthy throughout the duration of this season. But you look at the elite teams in the NFL, I think Kansas City is elite. I think the Eagles are an elite team. The 49ers are an elite team. But they have gone to distance that a lot of teams haven't. The Chiefs have won 2 Super Bowls. The Eagles have represented the NFC in the Super Bowl. The 49ers always are in the NFC Championship game and recently have represented the NFC in the Super Bowl. But if Kansas City doesn't get there out of the AFC, the next team I gravitate towards is the Miami Dolphins. And I say that knowing that 2 weeks ago, the Miami Dolphins went to Buffalo and absolutely got destroyed. So this is a big statement game for the Dolphins and a big measuring stick for the Miami Dolphins, where if they lose the game by a measly 3 points, I don't think anyone's getting on the radio or getting on TV on Monday and are slamming the Miami Dolphins and are questioning what the apex of the Miami Dolphins can be this season. But if they get blown out again, then up against the 2 best opponents that they faced this year, they would have horrific showings. So out of all the teams, when I look at the NFL this week, the team that has the most to prove, the team that's under the most pressure, it is the Miami Dolphins. And in this spot, I look to 2 people to validate their success and validate it in a different standard. For Tyreek Hill, if he goes in a Dolphins win for 200 yards and puts up 2 touchdowns and adds to this pace of 2,300 receiving yards and 17 receiving touchdowns this year, I do believe on Monday, when you try to evaluate what the headlines will be on Monday, it will be, okay, Tyreek Hill has an opportunity to win the MVP, and he may be the leader in the clubhouse. Because it's not disrespectful to Tua Tagovailoa. I really do enjoy Tua as a quarterback. But when I look at who's the most valuable to the Miami Dolphins, who do I think is the best player on the Miami Dolphins, I do give the edge to Tyreek Hill over Tua Tagovailoa. And if on a big stage, we all know how great Tyreek Hill is. But if he goes on one of these video games type of performances again on Sunday Night Football, and he is clearly the best player on the field with an abundance of talent, when you have Jalen Hurts and you have A.J. Brown and you have Devontae Smith and you got Jalen Waddle and you got Raheem Mostert and you got DeAndre Swift and Brandon Graham and you could keep on going, Big Play Slay and all the names that are on both sides of the ball for both of these teams, there's a very good chance on Monday we're talking about Tyreek being the best player on the field and trying to do something that has never been done before in the history of the NFL, where there's never been a wide receiver to win the NFL MVP. We've seen a place kicker win the MVP before, but in a pass-heavy league now, we have still never seen a wide receiver win the MVP. Now, 2 years ago, you thought Cooper Kupp had a case to be made with the Triple Crown. Last year, people like myself were leading the charge for Justin Jefferson. But for Tyreek Hill, it does feel as if he has a damn good chance to win the MVP this year, because who else is going to win the award? Mahomes almost has to be perfect now to win the award again. And even though no one would ever doubt Mahomes, that offense has not clicked yet to the level that we expected at. The Bills are too up and down for me to make the case for Josh Allen to win the MVP. Jalen Hurts, the Eagles' offense has to play better. Brock Purdy has no leg to stand on for the MVP after last week. Heck, I would even make more of the case for Christian McCaffrey, but we got to check in with his health. I don't think the Ravens are going to be as dominant as they need to be for Lamar Jackson to win another MVP. So you go around, it's like, who else can you make the case for? Well, if the Dolphins if the Lions get the number 1 seed in the NFC, maybe Jared Goff is going to get a big MVP push. Maybe Trevor Lawrence, if the Jaguars get back on track, and they had a victory last night against the Saints, maybe he got some MVP votes. But right now, it feels like it is a two-man race for the MVP, and they're both Miami Dolphins with Tua Tagovailoa and also Tyreek Hill. And personally, I believe I give the edge to Tyreek, and I believe what Tyreek is doing this year at the wide receiver position is more impressive, not taking a shot at Tua, than what Tua is doing at the quarterback position, even though Tua is in the midst of a very special season, not only for himself, a feel-good story, but also for this Miami Dolphins team, where for the first time in a long time, there is legitimate excitement with this team, probably for the first time since the Wildcat. Like, is that really how far we have to go back? And what did that Wildcat team turn into? Nothing really much in terms of the large scheme of things. But it's the timing of it, it's all working out. Outside of Kansas City, there's not a lot of teams that you fear in the AFC. And on the MVP list, there's not a lot of names that have taken the baton and have run with it. So through the first 6 weeks of the season, as now we're in week 7, the Dolphins could absolutely go to a Super Bowl this year. Tyreek Hill or Tua Tagovailoa could absolutely win the MVP. And this team has a chance to have a big party coming their way in February. But on Sunday night, they got to show up. They got to prove that they are on the cusp of becoming an elite team in the NFL. And this is an enormous measuring stick going up against the team in the Philadelphia Eagles last year that represented the NFC in the Super Bowl. And also, it's another chapter in Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts and their connection with one another, going back to their time at Alabama, where you had Jalen Hurts at halftime get replaced in the national championship game against Georgia. I remember like it's yesterday, Kirk Herbstreit was speculating it. Then Tua comes off the bench, ends up having that game winner in overtime to Devontae Smith, who now plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. And from there, Jalen Hurts was a good teammate, stuck around for another year when he could have transferred. Then Tua gets hurt in the SEC championship game against Georgia. Hurts comes in off the bench out of relief for an injured Tua Tagovailoa and defeats Georgia to win that SEC title game before the baton was handed back over to Tua for the college football playoff game. So that's where we're at right now. And then you know that Hurts goes on to Oklahoma, redefines his career, is a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, and then gets drafted in the second round. And Hurts has solidified himself as a top 5 quarterback in this league. And Tua, who was always like the golden boy, was always supposed to be the number 1 overall pick, he fell back to 5, did land in Miami. Rough start last year with all the concussions, but now both of these quarterbacks that were once in the same quarterback room, they are clicking. They have really good teams, and they could potentially, when they meet up on Sunday, be showing us a preview of the Super Bowl this year. So that game this weekend gets me the most excited. Eagles coming off a loss. What can they show? Dolphins trying to show how great they could be this year. And we could have 2 of the top MVP candidates on the same team in Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa trying to make a big statement in South Philadelphia on Sunday night. And if this game doesn't get you excited for football, I just don't know what will. So do you think there is a good chance that Tyreek Hill could win the MVP this year? I think there is. And the MVP has never been won by a wide receiver. Someone has to be at first. Why wouldn't it be Tyreek Hill, where he's closing in on pace over 2,300 yards and 17 touchdowns this year? And that could be a fun debate. Who would be the better MVP choice for the Dolphins? Is it Tyreek Hill or is it Tua Tagovailoa? And right now, I don't see how you make a case. If you say, Zach, they're not the top 2, they're 2 of the top 5 out of all the MVP choices right now that are available in the NFL.